Have you ever felt that shiver down your spine while driving on a dark road at night? That uncomfortable feeling that the darkness outside is no tempe. The feeling that something is watching you back from the abyss beyond your headlights. For most of us, it's just a passing fear. But for the men who live on the asphalt, the truck drivers, there are rules. Survival codes that are not written in any manual. And the first rule, the most important, the most sacred of all, is don't stop, don't know. No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, no matter how human it seems. What if that car that has been following you in silence for miles simply disappeared into thin air? What if the woman calling for help on the side of the road revealed a smile that does not belong to this world? What if the radio, even when turned off, began to whisper your name? This is no longer an urban legend. This is Jonas' confession. A truck driver with 27 years on the road who, on his last trip, broke the main rule. What he saw that night, in the solitude of the highway, changed everything. Get ready to hear his story. And after this, you will never look at a dark road the same way again. The image is familiar to many. A cliché etched in the collective imagination by diesel and loneliness. The solitary beam of headlights tearing across a dark road, the constant, hypnotic hum of the engine, and the omnipresent darkness. A living entity that seems to swallow everything beyond the reach of artificial light. For truck drivers, this is not a passing image, but the very tapestry of their lives, the stark reality of countless nights. And it is in this setting of profound isolation, a world contained within the metal and glass bubble of the cabin, that stories emerge. They begin as whispers in greasy gas stations, evolve into crackling conversations on ham radios, and solidify into legends, transforming the ordinary fatigue of the journey into a state of primal and terrifying alertness.
My name is Jonas. For 27 years, my world has been the asphalt. I have crisscrossed this country from end to end more times than I can count, hauling everything from grain to heavy machinery. I know the creaking of every part of my the urema, as I named it in honor of an old flame. I know the rhythm of the road, the dangerous dance between sleep and the need to meet the deadline. And I know the stories. I've always known them. At first I was like the newbies, chest puffed out and a skeptical smile. That's a tired mind thing, I said. It's sleep playing tricks. But 27 years on the road teach you that some things have no easy explanation, and that loneliness has teeth. The narratives, which mix the purest regional folklore with supposedly true and visceral accounts, paint a dark and frighteningly coherent picture of the roads. One of the most recurring themes, a classic in the macabre repertoire, is that of the car that follows. It is not just any car. Drivers, hardened men who are not frightened by little, tell of old vehicles. Spectres from an automotive past, an Opala with corroded paint, a Corselli with its color faded by time, often with their headlights off or with a weak and sickly glow. They appear out of nowhere in the rearview mirror, a dark spot in the darkness. They make no noise. They are just there. My first experience with the inexplicable happened on a long crossing, the infamous highway of death, on a winding stretch somewhere. The rain fell fine and persistent, a grey veil that transformed the few streetlights into ghostly blurs. I was tired. My eyes were burning. The caffeine from the thermos was already losing its effect. That's when I saw it, an Opala black. I couldn't see the driver, just the silhouette of the car materializing in my mirror as if it had emerged from the wet asphalt. It kept a constant distance, about 50 meters behind. I pressed the accelerator a little harder, and the engine responded with a deep roar. The Opala kept up with me, effortlessly. I slowed down. It slowed down. There was no logic, no overtaking lights, no attempt to get closer or further away. It was a passive presence, but terribly watchful. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the cabin. I remembered the stories and warnings of my older colleagues. If a car like that follows you, don't stop, don't provoke, pray and keep going. For almost 2 hours, it was my silent companion. When the first lights of a village began to appear on the horizon, dye in the sky a pale purple, I looked in the rearview mirror. The Opala was no longer there. It simply disappeared. There was no shoulder, no entrance, nowhere to go. It dissolved into the dying night. That day, my skepticism began to crack. Another element that populates the imagination of those who cross. The country on wheels is the solitary figure on the side of the road. It is a sight that defies logic and instills immediate fear. It could be a woman in white, her dress fluttering as if there were a breeze that does not exist. It could be a man standing still, motionless, staring into the distance. Or, most disturbing of all, a child in the middle of absolute nothingness, miles from any sign of habitation. The initial reaction is always the same, a twinge of concern, the human impulse to stop and offer help. But this impulse is quickly smothered by the fear emanating from these figures. I remember one particularly clear night, under a starry sky in the countryside. I was driving along an endless straight road, the monotony of the landscape inducing a trance-like state. That was when my headlights caught a shape on the shoulder of the road. It was a woman. She was wearing a light dress, maybe white, hard to tell in the yellow light. Her hair was long and dark. She was standing with her back to the road, staring out at the dark countryside. The first rule of the road echoed in my head: don't stop. But something about her caught my attention. I slowed down instinctively, and that was when terror set in. Without turning completely around, her head swiveled at an impossible angle, her neck snapping audibly above the sound of my engine. The face that stared back at me was not human. Her eyes were too dark, empty sockets, and her mouth was open in a wide, grotesque smile. A black slash in the paleness of her skin. I stepped on the accelerator with all my strength, my heart hammering against my ribs, cold sweat dripping down my forehead. I looked in the rearview mirror, and she was still there. Her head twisted, her smile fixed on me, until the darkness swallowed her again. The most experienced are unanimous in their recommendation. No matter how real it seems, no matter how tempting, it is to help, don't stop. These urban legends, these stories, feed on the tension and loneliness inherent in the profession of truck driver. The human brain was not made to face hours on end of darkness and isolation. Sleep deprivation creates mirages. The tired mind fills the void with its own fears. Stretches of highways famous for fatal accidents, where metal twisted and lives, were lost, gained the reputation of being haunted. In the Serra de Petrópolis in Rio de Janeiro, many swear they see the loira da estrada, the ghost of a young woman who died in an accident on her way to her wedding, wandering through the fog, in search of a ride to take her to her final and tragic destination. They say that if you stop, she gets in the car, points to a dangerous curve ahead, and whispers, "That's where I died," before disappearing, often causing the driver to lose control. There are also stories of auditory manifestations, as frightening, or even more frightening than the visual ones. Voices that whisper on the radio, even when the device is turned off or tuned to a dead frequency. It's happened to me. A low hiss that slowly transforms into a voice, a low lament, a stray word. Sometimes my own name whispered with a clarity that chills the soul. There are reports of banging on the roof of the cabin in deserted stretches, of figures crossing the track at high speed, forcing sudden braking that, when checked, revealed nothing but the empty road and the oppressive silence. A colleague, a man named Ayrton, once told me, with glassy eyes and a trembling voice, that while crossing a desolate stretch called the Ghost Road in the Amazon, the load in his trunk began to move violently. He was transporting wood, heavy logs. He stopped, his heart in his mouth, and when he opened the compartment, he found the logs exactly as he had tied them, motionless. But the sound of something heavy being dragged and banging against the interior walls accompanied him for more than 100 kilometers, whether it's a genuine fear of the supernatural or the complex and fascinating effect that sleep deprivation and extreme loneliness have on a tired mind. These stories have become an indelible part of road culture. They are more than just horror stories to tell around an imaginary campfire. They are a coping mechanism, a way of giving name and form to the unnameable fears that the night on the road inspires. They are a constant reminder that, in the dark and silent vastness of the night, any shadow can hide a deep and ancient fear. And any distant light, instead of promising safety, can be a bad omen. Today, I am no longer a skeptic. I have learned to respect the road and its mysteries. I have learned to listen to my elders, to bless the Urema dashboard before each night trip, and to never, ever underestimate the darkness. Because each trip is still a gamble. Each night is an unknown. And at every turn, on every lonely stretch, The possibility of a new story, of a new thrill, reminds me that I am just a small point of light in the immensity, and that out there, in the darkness that watches me, many things wait, and they know my name. Each trip thus becomes not just a job, but a potential and frightening adventure in the heart of the darkness of the highways.
And so ends Jonas' story, or perhaps his final warning. The cabin of a truck can be a lonely universe, a place where the weary mind and the endless darkness meet to create, what? Ghosts? Or truths we refuse to see when the sun shines? How many drivers, right now, are accelerating a little more, with their hearts in their mouths, looking in the rearview mirror and praying that the car following them is just an ordinary traveler? How many look away from a figure stopped on the shoulder, afraid of what they might find if they stare too long? Jonas' story is just one. The roads are long, and the nights are even longer. They hold secrets, and they remember. If you, like us, feel a fascination for what hides in the shadows, if your curiosity is stronger than your fear, then join us. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because the darkness is full of stories waiting to be told, and we will tell them all. Next time you hit the road. Good luck. You'll need it.